Hello, all you wonderful mummies and daddies out there. So this is episode 2 of the series Titus 2:4, which tells older ladies we got to teach the young women how to love their children. And so in the first episode, I gave you my rundown of why I'm doing this and my my resume as to why uh, you could at least listen to what I have to say. You don't have to agree with it or do it, but I just want to throw out some things I learned. And believe me, this is stuff I've learned. I'm not trying to say I'm smart. I'm just saying, you know, I'm normal for 1,000 years ago when little girls wanted to be moms. But anyway, so this particular one, I'm calling, what is it I'm calling this? The Modern Mother and teaching children each child differently. So personalizing your parenting. And as we all know, and as parents, see parents, but you know what? A lot of parents just don't know this. It used to be when they had large families, you would have your older kids um, watching the parents parent. Like we had 6 or 8 kids, the older kids would not only get to watch the parents parenting their younger siblings, they would also get the opportunity to help raise them. They would be in on it. And then by the time the youngest were adults, then the oldest children would be married and having children. And then the youngest kids could watch as an aunt and uncle help raise their older brothers and sisters' children. And that was a day that we all lived happily together in little wonderland of families, aunts and uncles. And there was a day like that. I hear stories about this all the time from my mom. My mom's family, she'd go visit them. We grew up in Dallas, but my mom would go and visit her uncles and aunts in New York City. And they would have all these kids, all these siblings would have all their kids, and they'd all live on the same block. And so you had several generations constantly around each other. And everybody would watch everybody else's kid. They'd hand, and and Catholic families, that's still very possible, to happen today. And so we still do. And then, and Islamic families, also have large families. But today's modern parent, um, a lot of them were raised with only one sibling, if any. And they didn't get to see this cycle. They didn't get to be around a lot of babies. And I know a lot of people that think, oh, yeah, I'm experienced with kids, but yet they babysat the next door neighbor a few times. They didn't get that every single day exposure to small children. I'm going to say things that are going to sound stupid to a lot of people, but bear in mind, there are people that just don't know anything about kids. And that's perfectly okay if you've never been around kids. Why would you know about children if you hadn't been around them a lot? And we do have a couple generations now that just may not have been around children, so they just don't know. But so I'm going to just say the obvious. Children are very different. Um, Boys and girls respond very differently to parenting skills. And so you shouldn't assume what works with one child will automatically work with your other children. I've spoken to parents. Well, no, I'm not even sure I think I overheard, some parents saying, "Oh, you should try this. This just works perfectly with my child," and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, yeah, no. And then they're expecting the second child to be as well behaved as the first child. That's always a shock to parents when their second child that has the middle child syndrome, which is kind of true. Not always, of course. All of this is just general information. But a lot of times you've got the middle child is very different than the first child. And it also depends on how you space them apart. You're going to have a child probably, if you have them within 2 to 3 years, the second child, he's probably going to feel in competition with the older one. And so he's going to be competitive. My brother and I are 11 months apart, my older brother. And oh my goodness, I constantly tried to impress him. That was impressing my brother was the biggest thing on my agenda. And so I competed with him, which irritated him greatly. And I wanted to do things before him. So I learned how to tie my shoe first. Oh my word, that was such an accomplishment. And I think my brother was very unhappy about that. But I tried harder, because I was the younger sibling. So anyway, you're going to find that in your kids. Each of them have their own little personality. And as parents, you need to study the child and say, okay, what does that kid need? Obviously, a lot of times parents think they're going to just keep them as a group. All the children are going to be just the same. We're going to keep them in a group. But you know what? If you have jealous children, if your kids are jealous, like you've got a toddler that's jealous of maybe a kid that's 6 or whatever, and following them around and trying to do everything they're doing, and they can get very discouraged because obviously a younger brother cannot keep up with an older brother. And so they can actually become very discouraged. And so it's good for a parent to separate that child and let them have their own little personality and encourage them in areas they don't compete. That he can have his own little thing that he does that doesn't compete with older brother. Okay, I didn't mean to get off on that. But anyway, so just give children special attention and be aware of what they're good at and encourage it. And don't encourage competition too much in children. They just don't understand competition when before they're, 6. So, and I'm going to give you practical advice like this. I'm not going to be giving you, well, that's not true. I'm going to give you some philosophical ideas too, but I feel like some of this stuff can be very practical. So, another thing is, let's say you hear from the very best person. Do A, and you will get this B outcome that you're looking for. And so you try it. Let's say you're putting your kids to bed at night. Oh, do this. And it might have worked with one of your children. Um, but if you've tried it enough, I would say several times, and it doesn't work, try something else. There is nothing wrong. I mean, you'd be surprised at how many parents will stick to what is not working, thinking that eventually it's going to work. No, if something isn't working, figure out a way to do it. Be creative. Think, one kid may need lots of naps. There are children that just love, I don't know if they would love them. I have met children that do love naps, but most children don't. And there's just no way to get them to take a nap, and they're driving you crazy. And so try something else. My mother used to not even tell us we were taking a nap. She goes, "This is your quiet time." That's all she said. You just have to be quiet. And of course, that can work when you're about 4 years old. But you'd have to stay in bed, and she'd give you little quiet toys. And then she said, "You be creative." And so why don't you draw something? Why don't you make up a play? Why don't you make up a song? Why don't you, little boys may not like that, but give them maybe good books to read. And let me just stop and give you some of the best advice. This was my idea. I did not hear this from somebody else, but it worked so great. I want to give it to you. So my sons, a lot of young boys do not like to read. And I I don't know if my boys would have liked it or not because I started this so early. So once my boys started to read, I amassed a small little library for appropriate books, historical books and Hardy Boys. I don't even remember if it's the Hardy Boys or not, but I tried to get a good, wholesome, what little boys would like to read, little adventure series. And I stacked in their room these books, age appropriate books. And I told them once they could read, they would no longer have a bedtime. Now, they would have to go into the rooms and they would have to get in their beds, but they didn't have to go to sleep. They could keep the light on. And there was a time I attached one of those little personal lights, the little tiny ones, to my son's bed because he was a little bit older and the younger one did need to sleep. So I put that and I said, "You don't have a bedtime anymore. You can go around bragging all you want. I don't have a bedtime. I can stay up till 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock if I wanted to." And I meant that. But they had to be reading. And I can tell you to this day, my sons are in their 30s and they love to read. And there was a psychological thing that happened that reading was, part of being a big boy. I was like, the big men got to read, and I picked stuff that they enjoyed reading. So anyway, just to throw that out. Now, this is where I know a lot of parents go, "What? They can stay up so—" Okay, yes. For the first 2 weeks, there was a little bit of an adjustment because the boys did stay up really late. As long as they were being quiet, I didn't have any other rules, besides just read the books on the list. And after about 2 weeks, they started going to bed. They started falling asleep at a regular time. Now, we were homeschooling at that time, so that is a caveat that I need to insert in there, so you know that when they slept until 8:30 or 9. The reason being is because they stayed up, but they were reading and they actually read it. And I could ask them at the table the next morning, "What did you read?" And they were all excited about it. So that's just to throw that out. Okay, so your children are going to be different. Find a technique that works with each child. Um, Give it some thought, and always with prayer, of course. Now, if you're going to go Google motherhood techniques, be prepared to get a lot of expert advice from people who either have no children or their children aren't raised, so you don't know how they turned out, or they are in jail or something horrible like that. But anyway, you have to be very careful about Googling because you never know what kind of advice. You never know if it's going to be good or bad. So I would stick with people I knew. Watch the children of the people who give advice. And I don't mean they're little children, I mean they're adult children. And here's why. People often correlate the fact that a child is behaving well as a child to that's going to cross over and be well behaved adults, which is not true. You need to check, and we'll talk about that in another episode. That's its own episode. But that just because a child is very quiet, they could have been bullied into silence. You just don't know exactly why they're being good. But you want to watch the children as adults. How do they turn out? Then you can trust that parents, long term advice. So I'm just going to go back to what I was saying before. Parents who have not been around children often have unrealistic expectations about what childhood is supposed to look like and how children are supposed to behave. They have zero concept of what is age appropriate behavior, even if they read books. Now they're going to get milestones in books on these parents, and like they have to talk. They need to be talking. They need to be able to brush their teeth at this age, or you're going to get this. But I'm talking about psychological and spiritual. You don't really see that, and you're not going to get that in a lot of books. And some of the I I even watch some male childhood quote experts who have lots of children. And even they are not good with young children. I would start listening to a male, and I know that sounds terrible, but I'm just going to tell you that's true. I would start listening to male advice, even Christian male advice, when they're a little bit older. There's something very non-nurturing about a lot of this male advice. So many parents are just useless as to how babies and toddlers are supposed to behave. Now, they think that children come with downloaded instructions in their brains, and they can't understand why their children don't understand phrases like, "Be good, don't do that." See, children don't have any idea what that means. So one of the first pieces of advice I'd like to give you is say to your child and then show your child what they're doing wrong. You can't expect them to know what you mean. They didn't, their little brains are just blank slates. If you if you say to them, no, that's bad, or no, don't touch that, or and you have to say stuff like that occasionally. But my suggestion is act out what you would like them to do. Don't just tell them no. Tell them and act it out. And show them they need to see it and they need to hear it. What are your expectations from them? Most children don't know why they're doing something. They're not purposely doing something bad. They're just curious. When they touch things, when they grab things they shouldn't, that's so natural for children. They're not being bad. That is how God made them learn. So do not get upset at your children if they say something they shouldn't. And depending on the age, of course, um, just say no, and then explain to them uh, uh, what they do need to do. Like, oh, be very careful when you drink out of grandmother's cup. Be very careful. Do like this. Mm. Thank you, Grandma. And then put it down just like that, so carefully, and explain to them. Because children, they spill something and they just know that they're in trouble, but they don't know why they don't understand why they're in trouble, and just explain it to them. And if a child continues to grab something they shouldn't, I would not get in the habit of scolding your children. I did not scold my children, and my mom never scolded us. You tell them what they should do and what they shouldn't do, but you're never upset at them. You're not, don't do that. You're upset. I just be calm. There is no advantage to anything. Um, Now, I will tell you the one advantage of always having a calm voice and reserving your upset voice or your loud is when they're in danger. Then a child is not used to that. You're going to startle a child. Don't do that. Get away from it. It's dangerous. Do you see what I'm saying? That is when you raise your voice. See, okay, I'm just going to be honest with you. And I don't mean to insult anybody out there. I really don't. But when I grew up, we called the mothers that were constantly don't touch that, blah, blah, blah. They would call them Walmart mothers. They were women that just didn't know how to raise children properly. Sorry, I went to Walmart. I don't specifically mean all women at Walmart are like that, but you can see, let's admit, when you go to Walmart, you can see some bad parenting. I think we can all assume that. Sorry, I like Walmart. Anyway, but there are times after you've said things over and over and over that that you just need to distract them. You don't want children to hear something negative constantly during the day. So pick your battles. And okay, let's just say your children can be embarrassing in public, but don't let that drive you how you react to your children in public. Now, if your child, okay, another example of this is if your child hits another child, don't just say, "Oh, we don't hit." Now, of course, you can say that, but then always give them something positive to do. Show them, oh, if you want to touch them like this, or we ask the mommy. We have to ask the mommy of this child if we can touch them, or we need to be gentle, and then you show them what gentle is, and always give them positive feedback when they do it right. You got to make sure your child, especially those little children that are just always in trouble, they're just always getting into something. You got to make sure they get a win. You don't want them to constantly hear negative. They need to know that that they're not doing these things on purpose. At least most parents ought to know that. I do know a lot of mothers do assume their children are doing something for bad motives, and they're not. Many older mothers, I especially see it in older moms, they're helicopter mothers. And they're always, getting close to their children and hovering over them, making sure they're doing it exactly right all the time. And, my mother passed down an old saying to me, give them twice as much love as discipline and give them lots of discipline. Now, if you're not careful, some people will think, oh, that means give them lots of beatings. And no, 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 no. That's not what I mean by discipline. That just means training. Um, my mom always believed in very age appropriate discipline. Okay, which brings me to the next point. Um, Here's another very practical. My mom said for the first few years of their life, give them as many rules as their age is. So, like if they're 1 year old, make sure they have one rule. And that first rule always has to be obey mommy and daddy. Sorry, that was an interruption. I got a phone call. So where was I? Let's see. One rule per age that they are, and of course the first one has to be obey mommy and daddy. But then just make that not too complex. Don't be scolding your children or constantly on your children for something. Again, I'm going to spend a lot of time on appropriate punishment and another one, but this one is a little on more lighter side. So if your child's age 2, give them 2 rules. Maybe one is don't go down the stairs. Obey mommy. Don't go down the stairs. And that's a permanent rule for their childhood, or until they are old enough to do it. But in other words, the second one is one that you keep the same that whole entire year. And usually will go on for a while, they're taught through their toddler years. Okay. So 3 years old, get 3 rules and stick to those rules. Never ignore bad behavior. But don't overrule them to death either. And I don't mean overrule, I mean put too many rules on them. Use the fact, I'm going to give you a piece of diamond advice. By far, the vast amount of children want to please their parents. They are not deliberately disobeying you. They want to impress you. They love you. That is what God put in their hearts. I know there are a lot of Calvinists out there who think the children are children of wrath. Okay, but I'm not being theological right now. We can argue theology later. But most children want to do good and impress their parents and get positive feedback. Children don't normally want to be chastised. Use that to your advantage. So don't discourage them with too many rules. If a child is bombarded with the idea that they're disappointing and irritating their parents, they're going to eventually give up and just quit trying to obey you. If you see your child getting frustrated, sometimes it's okay just to allow them some space and give them some time without scolding them. And so if you see them doing something wrong, distract them. Just distract them. Don't get upset. Okay. Now, I've heard different things from different parents, but I'm just going to give you an average. If you have to correct in a negative way your child more than 3 to 5 times a day, that is enough for anyone to handle. You as an adult, you have to be honest. How many times can you handle being told you're doing something wrong? Learn to cultivate a way of distracting and saying it in a positive way where they don't feel scolded or that like they're doing something wrong and upsetting mommy and daddy. You know, I know I keep saying distract, but I think that is really good advice. Okay, let's just say you're at somebody's house and the kids, the parent, obviously these people don't have children because they've got all this stuff around that the children could break or stuff. Sorry, destroy. So go around and say, hey, we need to find something the kids can do. If you didn't bring it yourself, you can say a few no's, like don't touch that. Oh, you're gonna break that. Don't touch that. Don't touch that. And if the parents don't, the people there don't put it up out of the way of the kids, just suggest it. Say, oh, I've been to parents' home. I'm sorry, I keep saying parents. I have been to people's homes that don't have children, and they say, you just tell your child not to touch these things. Well, then you're never going to be able to sit down and talk to them. The whole time, when you have toddlers, for sure, you're going to have to be worrying about this. If you as want somebody to have a good time in your house and they have small children, get them something to do while they're there and childproof your house. Then you can sit down. Like I just had my niece come with her baby and I went and got some really good gates for my stairs. And so she could sit down and enjoy the time. And she's not going to have to be panicking because her children are now in a new environment with brand new, exciting things to touch. And of course, they're going to touch them. So after you've said 2 or 3 times to your child, no, 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 please don't touch that, then distract. Here, let's do this. If you see them running to get into something they shouldn't, grab them and distract them. But don't constantly. Okay. This is what I'm seeing with some of these kids. I'm saying kids, but young parents today. They are so sick of the 1960s. Well, we're just going to let our child do anything. They're like determined they're going to be really good parents. And that's wonderful. Do it, do it, do it. But they're over enthusiastic in showing other people how, tough love on their kids. And so when they get into public, they're just like, they the proof is in the pudding. If your kids are going to be well behaved, calm down. And you don't need to show that to anybody. You don't have to impress anyone. Being a parent is exhausting and wonderful and lovely and all time consuming, and you need breaks. And don't constantly, just don't worry about what other people think about how you're raising your children. Just don't worry about it. You do your best. You just have to impress God. Okay? You impress God and you get that child raised to where that child loves Jesus, and then you've done, you will show them that you did a good job. Okay. Now, another little piece of good advice is children behave better when they're outdoors. Of course, this is general. Some kids don't. Some kids do. But I would say most kids do, especially little boys. If you've corrected your child so much in one day that you're just like, okay, the kid can't take anymore, take him outside. You know, taking kids outdoors can do miracles for fussy children. Okay, I want to just give you one last story of my dad. And the point I would like to pass on to you is that always assume your child, any child under 3, is ignorant and is not deliberately disobeying you. Give them a positive message. Okay, now, back in the days when kids got spankings, and we'll discuss that in another podcast or episode. But my father had 6 children, and I only remember my dad spanking me once. But I remember my my other siblings getting spanked more. But I remember one time my dad spanked me. And he came in, it was at the end of the day, and I don't even remember what I did. But he came in at the end of the day and he sat on my bed and he said, oh my goodness, I had to have been under 8. And he said, look, Teresa, you broke the rules. And he was very solemn and very sincere because you broke the rules. And when you break the rules, you always have to be willing to take the punishment. That's just the way life is. And the punishment is your mommy told you you'd be spanked if you did it, and now you have to get spanked. And so I bent over, and I mean, he took off his belt and he really whacked me. It was hard. But after he spanked me, now he never spanked me to the point where I bruised, nothing like that. But then he stayed with me in my room. And after I calmed down, he said, look, you, Teresa, are a good girl. Everyone makes mistakes. All of us. I was spanked when I was little, and pretty much everybody does bad things. And that's just part of life. You learn, and you get the punishment, and you learn to never do it again. But you're a good girl, and I don't want you, and it's all over now. And you're going to be good from now on, and I'm never going to have to spank you again. And he spoke, and let me tell you what that did to me. I so much wanted to live up to that reputation my dad gave me. In his mind, I was like, I'm never going to let my dad down again because I loved him. My dad, we had so much fun. My dad was such a good father that I wanted to always live up to the good expectations that he gave us. And I think that's a model, not necessarily spanking, but always assuming the best of your children and speak into them good things. But it's just like Jesus said, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. So I needed the punishment that had been promised to me by my mother. So I got the result, which is important. The children need to understand justice has got to be served, but mercy is always in the eyes of the person giving the justice. And I always tell them, you know what? I love you. Say that to your kid. I love you, and you're going to be a good kid. And my guess is, in general, your kids will grow up to be good. Yeah, not perfect, of course. Anyway, okay, until next time. Bye bye.